Extreme poverty refers to people who live without being able to address their basic needs. And that includes access to water, access to sanitation, access to food. 836 million people today live on less than $1.25 a day. But if you look at a slightly bigger catchment, if you like, for poverty, people are living on less than $2 a day, that figure rises to 2.2 billion people. And if you take a slightly bigger figure yet again, use the figure of 8 people living on less than $8 a day, and we have half the world's population. We've made remarkable progress in reducing extreme poverty on this planet. In 1990, the number of people living in extreme poverty, that's people living on less than $1.25 a day, was 1.9 billion people. Today, it's 836 million people. And think about it, the world population has increased since 1990. It was 5.2 billion people in 1990, and today it's 7.4 billion, hitting 7.5 billion. So we have made progress, and I think we should acknowledge that progress, because going forward we need to do more. But the past shows us that where we have a vision, where we have a will, where we agree to work together as one global community through the United Nations, we can make a difference. Well, our figures show us that globally, the greatest contributor to reduction in extreme poverty has been growth. Some 70% of poverty reduction can be attributed to growth itself. Now, growth is necessary, but we are facing some serious challenges in sustaining growth. We have a planet which is reaching a number of boundaries, whether it be climate change, whether it be loss of biodiversity. We depend on natural resources, we depend on environment for our survival. And when the environment is degraded, we face consequences which will have an impact in terms of growth. What the Sustainable Development Goals do is it looks at the challenges that we face on the planet, whether it be poverty, whether it be inequality, whether it be environment, and basically resolves to address all of them together. And the reason why that's important is because any of those issues cannot be addressed by looking at the issue in silos.
End hunger, achieve food security and improved nutrition, and promote sustainable agriculture. Did you know hunger and malnutrition prevent people from improving their life means? It's like a spiral that goes round and round with no end. Moreover, climate change reduces the resources that we depend on to feed ourselves. Today, more than 800 million people suffer from hunger in the world. To end this by 2030, we must start today. An inspiring and real example, John Van Hengel. This retired citizen from Phoenix met a mother of 9 that managed to supply themselves with the food left over from supermarkets, and he organized a food collection through some of them, founding the first food bank in the 1960s with some volunteers and an empty space. They are now crucial across the whole planet. Your skills aren't different to John's. Where can we start? 1. Adopt a healthy and balanced diet. Keeping healthy does not consist of eating a lot, but doing it correctly. 2. Buy fruits and vegetables that aren't inadequate due to their imperfect state. 3. Plan very well your shopping before your products expire, or when ordering food in restaurants. 4. Organize and collaborate in food collections and give donations to schools and education projects that offer students full daily meals. 5. Promote in your cafeteria the wonderful initiative of pending coffee. You pay for yours and 1 extra, just in case someone needs it. In countries like Italy, many people with no resources enjoy a warm coffee. Ending with hunger starts with you and continues with your loved ones. Shall we start?
It requires governments to do many things. First, governments must invest in human resources for health so that there are health workers close to people. They must also invest in a social protection floor so that people who want services can buy services. It's not good enough to have services when they cannot afford it. And the final point is supply chains management system. So if you are going to provide services, you must also provide supplies. So when they need drugs or they need supplies to provide health, they'll be there to do it. I think it's important for us to be able to provide good nutritional advice to young people so they eat well, balanced diet. They eat enough fruits, they eat enough vegetables, and they have a balanced diet with micronutrients. I think it's important. So those are things that we can do. And young people need to know about their bodies, so comprehensive sexuality education and access to services, so we can prevent many things. And I'll give you an example. Today, the highest incidence of HIV occurs in the adolescent girls in Africa. They are the ones who suffer most. So if we can prevent that and we can give them the information, the knowledge, and the services to prevent it, we'll have done a great thing. I think with government, if government puts their mind to it, yes, because most of the things we're talking about here are things we're doing at this point in time. So governments, civil society, the private sector just need to be a lot more organized. And it's not expensive. It's just the fact that we need motivation and we need leadership and we need political will to put resources where it does matter. And if we do it, we'll get there.
First of all, think about why we have education anyway. A lot of the reasons we have education is because we think it will help us get good jobs. It also helps people be healthier. It helps society be more peaceful. And it helps countries be more secure, have less fighting. But all of those good reasons are magnified. They're much bigger if education reaches everybody. And at the moment, it's not reaching everybody. It's not reaching children in emergencies. It's not reaching disabled children. In many countries, it doesn't reach girls. So in the last 15 years, the world has got 110 million more children into primary school, which is a really great achievement, and we should be celebrating that. But we should also recognise, like I said earlier, that we haven't quite reached everybody yet. The new Sustainable Development Goal on education is much bigger, it's much more expansive. It doesn't just talk about primary education, it talks about early childhood and pre-primary education, which is really important for brain development. It talks about secondary education and routes to get skills and better jobs in the future. The reality is for many people that they learn throughout the whole of their lives, and they often need opportunities to retrain, for example. If you're an illiterate woman, maybe you need an opportunity to learn literacy because it would be useful for your family or for your employment. If you dropped out of school, perhaps you need some other way of getting back into school or training that's slightly different. If you lose your job, maybe you need to retrain with a different skill. So the idea that education just stops at a particular point and that's it, we're trying to challenge that. It actually is kind of like the foundation, in my opinion, of a lot of the other goals. So a more educated society and a more equitably educated society. So there isn't such a big gap between who has education and who doesn't have education. If we can try and close those gaps, then actually what we know is that we have more peaceful societies. Likewise, if we have better educated societies, particularly better educated girls, we also have healthier societies because those girls have fewer babies. Their babies are more likely to survive. Their babies are more likely to go to school when they reach the age of 4 and 5. And the mothers are more likely to seek healthcare for those children when they get ill. So there's lots and lots of benefits to education that relate to some of the other goals.
The goal takes the international community to commit to achieving, not just promoting, but achieving gender equality and women's empowerment by 2030 for all women and girls, whether they are in villages, they are in cities, whether they are of a particular race or community. All women and girls must be empowered, must get equal treatment. For the first time, you have a recognition that the target of ending violence against women is set and that it matters for sustainable development. The fact that harmful practices and forms of discrimination like child marriage and female genital mutilation must end. That unpaid care work, which particularly young girls and young women are victims of in many ways because it deprives them of opportunities, must be recognized, reduced, redistributed, and provided for by socially or by the state. And the fact that sexual and universal access to sexual and reproductive health and reproductive rights must be guaranteed, and also decent work, equal wages for equal work. And then last but not least, the right for women and girls to have equal participation and leadership. It is mission entirely possible. And it has happened, progress has happened in so many countries, but that's why the goal setting is important. That's why holding to account the follow-up and monitoring is important. That even in the more difficult countries, this will drive change and action and political will as never before.
Can you imagine waking up and not being able to go to a tap and turn it on and take a drink? You don't have a toilet. You don't have anywhere to relieve yourself. This is a situation for millions, billions of people around the world. They do not have infrastructure in these places to deliver water to people's homes. So people have to leave their homes, walk long distances, fetch water from perhaps a well or a lake, carry it all the way back to their homes. So that is definitely a part of the problem. Another part of the problem is pollution. Water bodies are being increasingly polluted by human waste, by industrial waste, and this means that the water that people might have access to is not safe for drinking. It could be in the billion range for people that don't have access to safe water. When it comes to sanitation, the sanitation crisis is huge. We have made some progress, but there's still so far to go. We're looking at approximately 2.4 billion people lacking access to safe sanitation. The really positive things about the new Sustainable Development Goal on water and sanitation is that it isn't just about developing countries. These are targets that are important for people in every country in the world. We produce a lot of wastewater on a daily basis, and we need better technology to really clean this wastewater so that we could even potentially reuse this wastewater for other applications. Think about the way you use water. Try to be more efficient with the way you use water. And it's important to remember that everything you put down the drain has an impact on your water quality. So it's important to think about these things. And I hope that this new Sustainable Development Goal will open people's eyes to these issues. Ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. Did you know that until 1850, cooking was done by scrubbing two stones together? It's not that long ago. Nowadays, we can't imagine our daily lives without electricity. But more than 1.2 billion people live without it, most of them in Africa and Asia. Without electricity, clinics can't work, students can't study, and entrepreneurs can't direct their competitive companies. We can all contribute at our own scale, saving electricity and aiming for energetic, renewable resources, adopting technologies, infrastructures, and non-polluting transports. We should all learn from Sam Goldman and Ned Tozen. They are 32 years old, they're from San Francisco, and their project has helped more than 30 million people in 60 countries. Their solar lamps give 12 hours of light without using polluting and dangerous kerosene, and they save up money as well as reduce the risk of fires. It's accessible, clean, mobile energy for homes. Are you aware of all the possibilities you have of contributing by saving energy? 1. Connect devices to power strips to disconnect all their activity. Cover the pots when cooking and you'll reduce up to 75% of energy. Read the instructions of household appliances to maximize their performance and energetic efficiency. 2. Conduct an energy counseling at home. A little investment will allow you some savings in your bills and mostly a reduction of your consumption. 3. Save energy also in transport. Public transport saves 4 times more energy than the car, and the savings you can achieve by walking or going by bike are 100%. 4. In winter, try to have an efficient heating system at home. Remove furniture and objects that block radiators, revise the boiler, and remember that every extra degree means a 7% increase of consumption. 5. Inform yourself of renewable energy uses. Share your knowledge and support sustainable energy projects for schools and houses. Use your energy. Use your power. Promote sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. Choose a job that you like and you won't have to work ever again. Despite the improvement of the work conditions, 800 million people, more than the whole of Europe, still receive $2 a day in salary. That isn't a job, that is injustice. The sustainable and inclusive economic growth that benefits everybody and doesn't damage the environment can only be achieved by creating decent employment and investing in technology. And most importantly of all, end forced child labor. It's in our hands. Do you want to know how to use it? Muhammad Yunus wanted to change things, and he did. It was him that invented and developed the microcredits in Bangladesh, lending money that many entrepreneurs needed but that didn't have the capacity to initiate a business. Their project was a key way of breaking the vicious circle of poverty and the exit of extreme poverty. He has inspired similar efforts in approximately 100 developing countries. He received the Nobel Peace Prize in 2006. Do you know where to start to get that far? 1. Each opportunity that comes up, hire with responsibility and support companies that respect decent and sustainable practices which don't harm the environment. 2. Promote Take Your Child to Work Day so that the youngest of the family learn what a healthy work environment is. 3. Do you think that the young are heard enough in the work environment? Give them the voice. You can learn from their energy, their tendencies, and their capacity to innovate. 4. If you are looking for a job, volunteering can also be a strategy. Improving the life of others, developing competences to develop professionally, widen your frontiers and your capacities. 5. Support and promote the use of microcredits with trustworthy institutions and empower the young, the long-term unemployed, and women so that they can turn into entrepreneurs. Let's encourage it. Let's promote it. More decent jobs, more future.
Well, I think science, technology, and innovation go together, and they're essential for all 3 pillars of sustainable development, whether it's economic growth, social inclusion, or environmental balance. Science, technology, and innovative products and services that come from science and technology are essential for us to achieve the sustainable development goals. And amongst the science and technologies that are available, information and communication technologies are probably the most important. ICTs generally, the internet specifically, is really a global shared utility. It's like water, transportation, and power. It's what maybe power was in the last century. And the least developed countries have been at the forefront of demanding access to this shared utility. It underpins so much of what we do today. And these are people that are living on less than $1 a day who are seeing the potential of technology and information communication technology specifically. They've already elevated ICT networks to being on par with water, transportation, and energy because they know that even though you can't eat a cell phone, it's a tool of empowerment. It enables you to get the information you need, to create the knowledge you need to make the wise decision that you must make in today's society, whether it's what crops to grow, when to take those crops to market, when not to take those crops to market. And the more our economies are tied together, the more important the technologies are. Once you give people the tools of communication technology, they'll create their own solutions to their own problems. And I think the best example of that is what's called M-Pesa, or mobile money, in Africa. Africans were disenfranchised from the financial system. They either didn't trust banks or didn't have access to them, but they did trust their mobile phone. So once they had connectivity, or people had connectivity, they created a program called M-Pesa, mobile money, which allowed them to exchange money, pay through their cell phone. I gave them a confidence that they never had in the financial system before, and so it's brought millions of people into the economic, finance, banking system that they were excluded from before. So this was an African technology created by Africans to solve an African problem, and basically what we did was provide them with the connectivity that gave them the tools of communication that allowed them to generate the innovative solutions that they need to solve their own problems.
It's definitely talking about monetary inequality, but if it was only an issue of money, things would be much easier to solve. It's about the different inequalities that people face because of their gender, disability status, because they're from a different ethnic or racial group, because they're from a sexual minority group, etc. And what is particularly troublesome with inequalities is that a lot of these mutually reinforce, and they create a huge barrier to people being able to fulfill their full potential. I think the goal is very much about everyone starting with the same types of opportunities to be able to forge their way through life. So it's very much about making sure that people have access to quality education, nutritious food, clean water. Inequalities cut across essentially all of the Sustainable Development Goals. In order to have robust and sustainable economic growth, you need to have investment in the people that live in your country, and that investment starts when people are born, when they're children, and it starts with their nutrition and their health. It follows through to their education, for youth being able to have a voice and find jobs. And that's how you get to the point where you then have societies that are growing quickly, that have innovators, that have business leaders, that are making progress on different things.
If you look at people who are living in rural poverty, what do they say about why they move to urban areas? They need job opportunities. They are looking for a chance to be part of the global conversation. They want internet connectivity. They want a chance, if they were not successful at school, for example, another chance to build human capital. That's about jobs. And if you look through the history of the world, where people have moved into cities, you see an expansion of the economy. So economic growth and development has very, very often in history moved with urbanization. Urbanization is positive for development. Well, who moves to urban areas is important, and it tends to be young people. Young, healthy people move into urban areas. So anticipate that the modernizing urban space is also a young space. And that has both advantages for people and for cities, but it also has risks. So young people are not with their families. They lack, in many cases, the social networks that offer protection for them. And so there are risks of exploitation, of underemployment, of violence, of lack of access in urban slums to the very health systems or educational opportunities that they had hoped to find. There can be a lack of those. I think part of what we have to anticipate is this clustering of young people in informal areas and start thinking about service structures and infrastructure that respond to them in really creative and innovative ways. So we do need transport so that young people can move into the city center for work and opportunity. We need health systems and new educational and training opportunities that don't cluster exclusively in the urban center, but in fact reach out into these informal areas. We need to get creative about housing. Absolutely, we need to think about protection in the context of housing, both for young and older people. Can we recreate communities in some way, in innovative ways in urban areas? I mean, looking at a goal that's on location and where people go is an opportunity to look at all the goals. And so to work on urbanization and create healthy cities gives you all these multiplier effects across all the other goals, absolutely. Because to create safety is to touch empowerment, is to touch employment, is to touch human capital. And what's happening, young people are moving to cities because it's their chance to raise and increase their human capital to be part of society in the next 10, 15, 20 years.
If we don't address climate change, the chances are that we will roll back many of the development gains that we have achieved during the last 20, 30 years. Climate change has an impact on all the other goals, whether it's education, whether it's achievement of health. Climate change will have an impact on the way we produce food, the way we have our forests, and if we don't address climate change, it will be either more difficult to achieve these goals or actually impossible to achieve them. There are increasing studies, but also increasing experience in many parts of the world which demonstrate that economic growth and addressing climate change do not need to be antagonistic to each other. There are countries like Denmark that have grown enormously while they kept their emissions below what they had before. Yes, there is time. It is getting increasingly difficult, but it is still possible to reach the overall goal of keeping global temperature rise below 2 degrees. But we have to act very fast, and we have to put in place all the emission reduction possibilities that we have looked at, and do that as soon as possible. There are 12 goals that have very strong climate change related targets, whether it's food security, energy efficiency, transport, urban renewal. All of those have impacts on climate change, and when the negotiators see that in fact countries are willing to do all that, they will be more positively inclined to agreeing to ambitious targets, and that's what we need to have. All actions have an impact, and we sometimes, just myself switching off my lights may not make a big difference in terms of the number of power plants it needs to supply that electricity, but if 10 billion people switch the lights off, it makes a huge difference. But at the same time, we also need to look at the big picture and make sure that we vote, we are engaged in the political process, and we look for solutions at the local level, at our own level, but also at the global political level.
So the oceans face 5 major challenges globally. These include overfishing, loss of ocean and coastal habitat like coral reefs and mangroves, invasive species, species that are often carried in ship ballast water and on their hulls that can create havoc in ecosystems when they're introduced. Pollution, particularly pollution from nutrients off farms, off wastewater, and also from plastics. The growing issue is marine plastics. And then lastly, a major issue linked to climate change is called ocean acidification, where a lot of the CO2 that's building up in the atmosphere from anthropogenic emissions of carbon dioxide are causing the oceans to acidify perhaps at the fastest rate in at least 35 million years. What's needed is much stronger institutions at the national level, at the regional ocean, to manage fisheries, bringing in good science to know, how many fish is safe to catch while not impacting the overall ecosystem, and better enforcement of regulations, laws regarding fishing. There's a big problem with IUU, which is illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. So much as 20% or so of fish are caught in the ocean illegally. So all of these issues have to be addressed if we're going to take a comprehensive approach. In fact, we've done some recent analysis that show that taking some of the key sectoral changes and reforms that are needed to sustain the oceans would probably, in most cases, create net new jobs. So whether it's improving recycling programs for plastics, which will create jobs, to better management of fertilizer and other nutrient pollution sources on farms, to how ships deal with the issue of how they clean up their ballast water from invasive species. All of these new and additional steps that the world needs to take would very likely be net job creators, and in some cases quite substantial ones. And with job creation comes economic growth. Great. So what can the average citizen in any country do? Well, certainly obvious ones come up relating to the rapidly becoming more serious issue of ocean plastics. Obviously, not throwing things away in a way that they might find their way into rivers, into waterways, into beaches to reduce the burden. On overfishing, there's a number of very good organizations around the world that have helped to certify various fisheries as being fished sustainably. And so a consumer can educate themselves about what these organizations are, and they even often have labels on fish sold in some supermarkets in the world where you can be fairly well ensured that that fish was caught more sustainably.
So a peaceful society is a society where people can live free from fear, free from violence, free from intimidation, free from arbitrary action, either by governments or by powerful corporations. And this, of course, regardless of race, ethnicity, sex, national or social origin. A peaceful society cannot exist where there is oppression or where there is systematic denial of rights and liberties. So a peaceful society also needs to be a just society. A just society is a society that respects the internationally agreed human rights and freedoms. But a just society, to me, is also a society that abides by ethical principles, that promotes the principle of integrity. And that is also why the Goal 16 has specific targets on fighting corruption. Use your right to vote. Every vote should count when it comes to creating more accountable, just, inclusive and peaceful societies. Engage as much as possible also through social media and various mechanisms that have been created by various groups to claim accountability, to make sure that there is less corruption in society. I would also say that at the local communities, as a citizen in your communities, engage in various activities that can lead, for example, to cleaner environments, to better participation of young people and disabled people. And finally, I would say, act as a global citizen. There's a lot of information available, so be aware of what is going on globally, but also in other countries, so that comparative information that you have will help you to better claim also accountability and action from your governments at national and local level.
It's important to have a goal on partnerships because realizing the agenda we want, the Agenda 2030, involves all sectors of society. It's a job for everyone, not just for governments. And this is the idea behind partnerships. One partnership that our department is very much involved in is the Higher Education Sustainability Initiative. It's what can universities do to bring about a better world in the year 2030. And this is what this partnership is about. They can do that through greening their own campuses, teaching sustainability, environmental management. They can also reach out to their communities, and over 300 campuses have signed up around the world. So it can't be measured in money terms, but it will affect a whole new generation of decision makers as it goes forward. Certainly there are indicators for this goal. For example, the percentage of national income devoted to foreign aid. There is an objective among countries that 0.7% of national income should be devoted to foreign aid. We are very far from that. The average is about between 0.2 and 0.3%, so we're far away from that goal. If we get closer to that goal, that'll be one indicator. Certainly the number of partnerships, we're keeping track of them. But more importantly, it's the actual achievement of the other 16 goals that will be the true determinant of success for Goal 17 also.